The sky over Eldenmoor had turned to ash. Snow fell in heavy silence, blanketing the dark pines and turning the mountain paths into silver ribbons. A young woman ran through the trees, her breath leaving white clouds behind her like fleeing ghosts. Her dress, once silk and sapphire, was torn at the hem, muddied with blood and frost. She clutched her cloak tighter, though the cold had long ago bitten through it. Behind her, faint hoofbeats echoed. They were still chasing her. Lady Seraphina, Valamant, daughter of the Duke of Braventhorn, did not stop. Not when her lungs burned. Not when her slippers tore open. Not when her tears froze against her skin. Because behind her was a fate worse than death. Marriage to Lord Roderick Thane, the king's favorite brute. A man who smiled while striking. Servants. A man who demanded obedience, not love, and ahead of her, only Forest Dot and maybe freedom. She stumbled over a root, hidden beneath the snow, and fell hard onto the icy ground. The cold hit her like a blade, knocking the air from her chest. She tried to rise once, twice, but her body refused. Everything pulsed and spun. Then ... darkness. When Seraphina opened her eyes, she was warm. A low fire crackled nearby, casting flickers of orange against the wooden ceiling. The scent of pine smoke filled her nose. She was lying on a cot covered in fur pelts, her boots removed, feet wrapped in cloth. Her heart leapt. Where was she? Who had found her? She tried to sit up and nearly gasped when a shadow moved in the corner. A man stood with his back to her, sharpening a blade. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair pulled back, a scar visible beneath his ear. He turned, and his eyes, green and guarded, met hers. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and rough. Seraphon's lips parted. "Where? I? My home. In the forest? You live here?" He gave a curt nod. For now. She tried to rise again, panic building. "I must go. They're looking for me." "You won't make it 10 steps out there in your condition," he interrupted. "Snow's deeper than your knees, and your ankles twisted." She looked down and saw the bandages. "You did this?" she asked. "I found you unconscious by the ridge. I carried you here." He walked over and placed a bowl of steaming broth beside her. "You should eat." She hesitated. "You don't even know who I am." He gave her a long look. "Does it matter?" Seraphina stared at the fire, her voice quiet. "It might." The man said nothing. After a moment, she took the bowl. "Thank you." She stayed the night, and the next, he introduced himself only as Kalen, a knight, once sworn to the crown, now living in exile. He didn't speak of the war that had exiled him, nor why his sword bore a crest that once belonged to the kings. Elite guard, and she did not tell him her name, only that she was fleeing a man she did not choose. They spoke little, but she watched him, how he moved through the snow like part of it, how he split wood in silence, how he lit the fire every evening before she asked. And he watched her, how she wrapped her bruised hands in cloth, how she hummed to herself without realizing, how she stared out the window like something inside her had been caged too long. On the 4th night, as the storm howled outside, Seraphina whispered into the fire, "If they find me, they'll take me back." Kalen didn't look up from the blade he was oiling. "Not if I stop them." She turned to him, her eyes wide. "Why would you do that?" He paused, then looked her in the eye. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted by duty." The forest. Around the cabin was still, save for the groaning trees bending under fresh snow. Seraphina sat by the fire, her feet tucked beneath the heavy pelts, watching the shadows flicker against the wooden walls. Kalen had stepped outside at dawn. He moved through the woods like a wolf, swift, silent, and always alone. She had tried. Not to be curious, but she was. She'd grown up surrounded by gilded halls, polished stone, and servants trained to bow at the click of her heel. Now, the world smelled of pine and firewood. The only crown she wore was a bandage on her forehead dot, and strangely, it felt more real. Kalen returned as the sun brushed gold across the snowbanks. He carried 2 rabbits, already skinned. His jaw was dusted with frost, his cloak heavy with cold. "You went far," Serafina said quietly. He glanced at her, but didn't speak. She waited while he hung the meat near the fire, cleaned his blade, and finally poured himself water. Then, as if her question had never left the air, he said, "There are tracks, 4 horses, heavy riders, about half a day north." Her heart froze. "Guards?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "They're looking for me." Kalen nodded once, but not near here. Not yet. Serafina wrapped the fur closer to her. "If they find this place, they'll kill you." He turned to her, his gaze unreadable. "I've survived worse." Later, as they shared a silent supper, Serafina broke the quiet. "Why do you live here, Kalen?" He stirred the pot absently. "Because I have no place else." "But you were a knight." He looked into the fire. "I disobeyed a direct order." Her brow furrowed. "What kind of order?" He didn't look at her when he answered. "I was told to burn a village. They said it housed rebels. It housed families." Seraphine's breath caught. "I refused. So they erased my name, took my land, stripped my oath." She stared at him. "You lost everything for your conscience?" He finally met her gaze. "What good is a sword if it serves no soul?" The silence between them was no longer cold. It had become something heavier, charged with weight neither of them wanted to name. Serafina stood and moved toward the small window. The moon hung pale behind a veil of clouds. Somewhere in that forest, men in armor were calling her name, but none of them knew her. Not like this, not like he was starting to. That night, a storm rolled in. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters. Kalen double-checked the doors, set traps along the perimeter, and laid his sword near the hearth. Serafina, half asleep, stirred on the cot. "Kalen?" He looked over from the doorway. She blinked slowly. "If they come... will you run?" He shook his head. "No." Her voice cracked. "Then promise me something." He stepped closer. "Promise you won't let them take me." Kalen knelt beside her, his voice low. "I swear it, Serafina. On the blood they spilled and the honor they stole from me, I will protect you." She reached for his hand without thinking. He didn't pull away. The storm passed by morning, leaving the world coated in fresh silence. The trees were crowned in white, the path to the ridge erased. From inside the cabin, the forest seemed almost peaceful, almost safe. But Serafina knew better. She sat near the hearth, watching Kalen repair one of the shutters. His hands moved with quiet confidence, every motion precise. She had begun to memorize the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, the way he never spoke unless his words mattered. He was unlike any man she had known in the court, and that terrified her more than any soldier. "May I go outside?" she asked softly. Kalen paused, then nodded. "Stay near the trees. I'll watch from the ridge." She wrapped herself in the thick wool cloak he had left her and stepped out into the snow. Her boots sank deep with each step, the cold biting at her cheeks. Still, she smiled. She hadn't breathed air this pure in years. As she walked among the pines, she began to hum a lullaby her mother used to sing before bed. Her voice drifted gently through the trees, unaware that Kalen had paused on the ridge to listen, a shadow of something soft flickering across his face. Near the stream, she stopped to rest. There, under a tree, she saw it, a small leather satchel. half buried in snow. Unmarked dots. She looked around. No tracks. No sign of a person. Her heart pounded as she knelt and pulled it closer. Inside, a single piece of parchment. She opened it. Serafina Valimant, dead or alive. Wanted for high treason and flight from royal engagement. Reward, 2,000 gold crowns. Her blood ran cold. The ink was still fresh. She returned to the cabin with trembling hands. Kaelin turned as soon as she entered, reading the fear on her face. "They're close," she whispered, holding out the paper. He read it once. His jaw tightened. Then he crossed to the back wall, pulled aside a fur covering, and revealed a hidden space behind a stack of crates. "Get inside." "What?" "Now." She stepped in. It was a small storage niche, just enough to crouch in. "I won't hide from them," she whispered. "You'll do it because I swore to protect you." Their eyes locked. Then voices echoed outside. 3 men, dismounted, moving slowly. Kaelin stepped out into the clearing, sword at his side, posture calm, but commanding. The lead man wore a crest Serafina recognized from the palace guard. Knight. The soldier greeted, feigning respect. "We're looking for someone. A runaway. A traitor." Kaelin's voice was flat. "I've seen no one. Mind if we search the cabin?" Kaelin met his gaze. "I do." The soldier stepped forward, hand on hilt. "By order of the crown." The crown stripped me of that oath. You hold no power here." There was a long silence. Then the soldier smiled coldly. "We'll be back, with fire if needed." They turned and vanished into the trees. That night, Serafina couldn't sleep. Kaelin stood watch outside. UNMOVING. She stepped out quietly and approached him. "You risked your life," she whispered. He looked at her under the moonlight. "It's already been taken from me once. I won't let them take yours." She searched his face. "Why does it matter so much?" Kaelin's voice was barely audible. "Because for the first time in years, I don't feel alone." She reached for his hand again. This time, he took it first. The air had shifted. Even the birds sensed it. Their songs had quieted, their wings absent from the skies above the forest. The soldier's visit had left more than footprints in the snow. It had planted fear like a seed, waiting to bloom. Inside the cabin, Serafina moved with nervous purpose. She folded blankets, swept the floor, boiled water. Tasks that once belonged to maids now filled her hours and gave her something to hold on to. But no task could quiet her heart. Wanted for high treason. The words echoed in her mind again and again. Her only crime had been saying no. Refusing a man who saw her as a jewel to be possessed, not a soul to be loved. And now the whole kingdom hunted her. Kaelin returned that afternoon with fresh herbs and a rabbit for stew. He said little, but his eyes were constantly watching, constantly listening. She admired how steady he remained, even under threat. That night, over dinner, she asked what had long burned in her chest. "Why did you really save me?" He looked up from his bowl. "You were half dead in the snow. Do you think I should have left you?" "That's not what I meant." He set the spoon down, then asked it plainly. She met his gaze. "You don't know who I am." "You didn't even ask." "I didn't have to." His voice was low. "I saw a woman running like her life depended on it. I didn't need to know her name to help her." "But it does matter," she said, pressing forward. "Because if they find me here, they'll punish you. Maybe even hang you." Kaelin didn't flinch. "And I'll die protecting the one good thing this war left behind." Serafina stared at him. Her breath caught in her throat. Was that what she was to him? A good thing? After all the pain he had carried? After all the years alone in the cold? Was she more than a burden? More than a cause? That night, the storm returned, fiercer than before. Wind lashed the windows. The fire snapped. Angrily in the hearth, Serafina couldn't sleep. Neither could he. When their eyes met across the room, something passed between them. No words, just breath, just longing. She crossed the floor and stood before him. Her voice shook. "If I asked you to kiss me, would you?" Kalen stood slowly. His hands trembled. "It wouldn't be right. Neither is anything else," she whispered. "But this feels real." His lips touched hers like snowfall, soft, cautious, uncertain. Then, like fire, urgent, consuming, undeniable. In his arms. She didn't feel hunted. She felt chosen. The next morning, they stood side by side on the ridge, watching smoke rise in the distance. A village burned. Kalen's face was stone. "They're flushing you out," he said, "burning anything nearby." Serafina clenched her fists. "Because I refused a monster." "No," Kalen said, "because you embarrassed him. That's worse to a man like Thane." She looked up at him. "What will we do? We hide. We wait. And if they come," he looked at her, jaw set, "we fight." But even as he said it, Serafina felt something change inside her. She was tired of hiding, tired of running, tired of letting others decide the shape of her life. A fire had awakened, not just in her heart, but in her spine. She would not be a helpless lady in a tower anymore. The days grew colder, the sky darker. But inside the cabin, something had begun to bloom. Not fragile like a flower, but fierce like a flame. Serafina was no longer content to simply survive. Each morning, she rose early, braided her hair back tightly, and practiced with the dagger Kalen had given her. Her hands were clumsy at first, but steadied with each passing hour. She wanted to be ready, not just to defend herself, but to stand beside him as an equal. Kalen watched in silence. He didn't stop her. He didn't say, "Be careful," or "Don't push yourself." He simply stood nearby, mending traps or chopping wood, his quiet presence like a shield. Once, she caught him looking at her, and he didn't look away. That night, as they sat by the fire, Serafina broke the silence. "You've lived here for years," she said softly. "Don't you ever miss people?" He looked into the flames. "At first, yes. Then I realized I didn't miss the people. I missed the feeling of being seen." She turned toward him. "And do you feel seen now?" He didn't speak right. Away. Then, almost in a whisper, "Yes, for the first time." They shared a quiet moment, and something changed in his face. He rose, crossed to a wooden box under the floorboards, and opened it. From it, he took a rolled bundle, a set of old armor, dulled with age, but still whole. The sigil on the chest plate had been scratched out. "I swore I'd never wear this again," he said. "But if they come for you, I'll need more than a sword and honor." Serafina touched the metal lightly. "You were born to protect. But who protects you?" Kalen gave her a long look. "You do. Every time you stay." Later that night, as she lay awake listening to the wind, something gnawed at her. She couldn't stay hidden forever, and Kalen couldn't risk his life just because she was too afraid to return. She sat up, heart pounding, and whispered into the darkness, "I need to end this." At dawn, she approached him while he sharpened his blade. "I want to go back," she said. "Not to surrender, to confront them." He stared at her. "You won't make it past the outer gates. They'll hang you. Not if I have a voice. First, not if I tell them what he is, what they forced on me. There are others like me, women without choice, without defense. If I speak, maybe ... double quotes. You think justice lives in that court?" Kalen's voice was rough. "They listen to gold, not truth." "I know," she said, "but I can't live the rest of my life in hiding." Not even with you. I have to try. Kaelin turned away. She stepped closer. Will you come with me? I'd follow you to the ends of the world, he said. But if you go back, I may not be able to keep you safe. Serafina took his hand. Then teach me to protect myself. And so he did. Each day that followed, they trained. Swordplay, evasion, reading the movement of a foe. She was a fast learner. Determined. Focused. By the end of the week, she could parry most of his strikes. By the 10th day, she knocked the sword from his hand. He laughed, and then kissed her like he hadn't since that stormy night. But as they stood in each other's arms, a hawk screamed overhead, a cry that didn't belong in winter. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. He looked toward the distant sky. Smoke. Rising from the east. Smoke curled through the bare pines like fingers. By midday, the stench of ash had reached the cabin. Kaelin stood on the ridge, his eyes scanning the horizon, every muscle tense. Serafina stood beside him, her hand gripping the hilt of the small blade hidden in her cloak. They're burning their way inward, he muttered. They're not searching anymore. They're hurting you. Then they know I'm close, she said quietly. Kaelin nodded. They want to flush you out, or trap you here. She looked at him. So what do we do? His jaw clenched. We run. By nightfall, they had packed what they could. The cabin, their shelter, their peace would be left behind. Kaelin buried his sword beneath the coals of the hearth, masking its shine with ash. We head west, he said. Through the Vale. Few dare cross it in winter. I'm not afraid, she replied. He glanced at her, almost smiling. I know. The forest was no longer silent. Boots cracked ice in the distance. Torches flickered through the trees. Serafina and Kaelin moved swiftly, cloaked by snow and shadow, careful to leave no trail. But the hounds howled behind them. They were close. Too close. They reached the edge of a frozen stream when Serafina stumbled. Her boot caught in a root hidden beneath the frost. She hit the ground hard, gasping. Kaelin turned instantly. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Just winded. He helped her up, his hand lingering at her waist a second too long. Then a whistle. Not wind. Steel. A bolt sliced through the darkness, embedding in a tree inches from Kaelin's shoulder. They found us, Serafina cried. Go. He shouted, drawing his dagger. Run to the ravine? I'll hold them. She froze. I won't leave you. You have to. He barked, but she didn't move. Instead, she stepped in front of him. The soldiers emerged from the trees. 5 of them, clad in black and thus gold. The crest of the palace burned on their chests. Lady Serafina Valement, the commander called. By royal decree, you are ordered to surrender. Then tell your king, she shouted back, voice shaking, that I'd rather freeze in the wild than warm the bed of a tyrant. The soldier sneered. We'll drag you either way. Kaelin stepped beside her. His blade gleamed. You'll die trying. The first soldier lunged. Kaelin met him mid-swing, steel clashing. The second moved toward Serafina. She ducked, slashed upward, catching him across the thigh. He screamed. The fight was brutal. Quick. By the end, 3 men lay in the snow, blood staining the white, but 2 escaped, running back toward the east. They'll return, Kaelin said, breathing hard, with more. Serafina wiped blood from her cheek. Then we don't stop. They crossed the ravine by dawn. Exhausted. Bleeding. Alive. Caelan collapsed beside a fallen log, gripping his side. You're hurt. He nodded. She lifted his tunic. A deep gash along his ribs. Not fatal, but dangerous in the cold. She cleaned it as best she could with snow and cloth. Her hands trembled. Not from fear. From rage. They hunted us like animals. They hunted you, he said through gritted teeth. She stared at him. No, Kalen. They hunted us. As she bandaged his wound, she whispered, I won't keep running. Not forever. I want to face them. I want to make them hear me. He closed his eyes. Then I'll carry you there, even if it kills me. No, she said fiercely. We'll walk together. And they'll see that a knight's honor and a lady's voice can bring even kings to their knees. The frost had begun to thaw, not in the forest, but in her. For days, they moved westward, beyond the ridge, over the dead rivers, across frozen valleys where no crown dared reach. Kalen grew weaker with each step, though he never complained. His wound festered despite her care, and the cold drained his strength. Serafina walked beside him, sometimes pulling him forward when his legs threatened to give. The roles had reversed. The protector now protected, the exile now leading. She had never felt braver or more afraid. They reached the outskirts of Cindergate, a small village bordering the capital. Smoke curled from crooked chimneys. Ragged children ran barefoot through muddy streets. No banners flew. No guards stood, but the people watched. They always did. Serafina pulled her hood low, helping Kalen into an abandoned chapel on the edge of town. Dust and cold clung to the air like cobwebs. She laid him on a bench and lit what little firewood remained. You should rest, he rasped. She shook her head. No time. I need to find help. There's no one you can trust here. I don't need trust, she said. I need ears. She stood at the chapel steps at dusk, drew a breath, and spoke. I am Serafina Valimant, daughter of House Valimant, once promised to a king, now hunted like a criminal. The villagers turned. Murmurs rose. I did not flee because I feared power. I fled because I refused to be owned by it. Some stared. Some stepped back. She lifted her chin. They say I am a traitor. But I say, a woman who says no is not a traitor. She is. A flame. By nightfall, word had spread. An old woman brought broth. A boy offered a candle. A blacksmith left a pile of rags and whispered, We remember your mother. She fed us during famine. Serafina bowed her head. Not all voices in the kingdom had gone silent. Kalen opened his eyes at dawn. He saw her sitting near the fire, face streaked with ash, eyes heavy with decision. You should have left me behind. He croaked. She turned to him. Never. He tried to sit up. Pain stopped him. I'm not what you need, he said. You're everything they said I didn't deserve, she replied. And I'll burn their kingdom to the ground before I let them take you again. She stood. The court meets in 2 days. There's an open hearing, a chance to speak before the lords. He stared. You'll never make it past the gates. I have witnesses now, people who've heard the truth. You could die, she nodded, or I could live quietly forever and hate myself for it. He reached for her hand. Then let me walk with you? No, she said gently. You'll stay. You'll heal. And if I don't return, don't say it. She kissed his forehead. I love you, Kalen. He closed his eyes. I've waited my whole life to hear that. Outside, the wind had calmed. But inside her, a storm was gathering. Not of fear, but of purpose. Serafina Valimant, hunted, bruised, forgotten, was about to enter the lion's den. And she would not go quietly. The palace loomed like a wound. In the skyline, white stone, gold towers, velvet banners, all masking the rot beneath. Serafina stood at its gates, cloaked in ash-colored wool, flanked by 3 villagers who had followed her from Cindergate. None of them carried weapons, not only truth. The guards hesitated. One recognized her face. His hand hovered over his sword. I'm here to speak, she said, at the open court. He looked her over. Lady Serafina is wanted by royal decree. I am Lady Serafina, she replied coldly. and you will either let me speak or strike me down in front of your people." Silence. Then the gates opened. The great hall was packed with lords in crimson, ladies draped in silk, men who sold justice for coin, and women who learned to smile while swallowing silence. The emperor sat atop his marble throne, jeweled and expressionless. Thane, the man who once promised her safety in exchange for obedience, leaned lazily beside him. Seraphan's heart thundered, but her steps did not falter. She reached the center of the court and removed her hood. Gasps filled the room. "Lady," Seraphina, a magistrate announced, "you stand accused of treason, abandonment of royal betrothal, and fleeing an imperial summons." She lifted her chin. "I stand accused of surviving." The room stirred. "I was promised like cattle," she said. "My worth weighed in gold, my will ignored, my voice stolen." Thane smirked. "You fled because you were afraid." "No," she said. "I fled because you wanted a doll, not a wife." He stood abruptly. "You defy the Empire." "No," she said louder. "I defy you." The Emperor raised a hand. Silence fell. "You've broken royal contract," he said. "You endangered a noble family's reputation. And now you return with dirt on your cloak and rebellion in your eyes." Seraphina stepped forward. "I return with truth in my voice. And if that frightens you, perhaps it is not I who betray the Empire, but you who betray its soul." The crowd murmured. A few nobles shifted uneasily. One woman in the gallery stood. "I remember her mother," she said. "A woman of kindness. This girl has her fire." A man beside her added, "She fed my village during the plague." Then another, "She gave coin to bury my son when no lord would help." Voices rose. Not just nobles, but servants. Scribes. Even. A guard stepped forward. "She gave me bread in winter," he said, "when I had no name." Thane growled, "This is a circus." Seraphina turned to him. "No, this is what the Empire truly is. Not stone, not gold, not fear. People. And people remember who stood with them." She looked to the Emperor. "You may silence me. You may punish me. But if you do, the court will no longer rule by power, but by fear. And fear doesn't last. Truth does." A long silence. Then the Emperor leaned forward. "You will not be punished." Thane stepped forward. "What?" "She may go," the Emperor said. "She has proven her courage, and reminded us of something we have forgotten." His eyes met hers. Not all battles are won by swords. As Seraphina turned to leave, the court parted for her. No chains. No guards. Only reverence. She did not run this time. She walked, shoulders back, gaze steady, into the cold wind beyond the palace steps, toward the man waiting for her. The snow had begun to melt. Not much. Just enough to reveal the green beneath. Just enough to remind the land that spring always finds a way. Kalen sat outside the old chapel in Cindergate, his side still wrapped in linen, his sword propped beside him. Villagers passed by with nods of respect. Some waved. Some left bread or herbs by the door, but his eyes were fixed on the path. Waiting. And then he saw her. Seraphina. Her cloak rippled in the breeze, and her cheeks were flushed with wind and victory. Her eyes scanned the horizon and found his. And for a moment, neither moved. Then she ran. Straight into his arms. She buried her face against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her gently, not caring who saw. "I thought they'd keep you," he whispered. "I thought they'd kill me." She breathed. He pulled back just enough to see her face. "And yet, here you are." She smiled. "They let me go. They let me speak." He laughed once in disbelief. "You moved the mountain." "No," she said. "We did." In the days that followed, the Emperor issued a decree that no woman could be forced into union without her explicit consent, that titles would no longer shield abusers, that the voice of a noble woman or a peasant would carry weight in the eyes of law. They said Seraphina lit the match, but it was Kaelin who taught her how to burn. They did not return to the palace. Did they retreat into the forest? They stayed in Cindergate, together. She opened a small school for girls, where they learned to read, to write, to speak without trembling. He trained the village boys and girls in swordplay and self-respect. Together, they built something no empire could destroy, a home. On their wedding day, it snowed again. Not a storm, just soft flakes, falling like blessings. She wore no crown. He wore no armor. Only truth between them, only love. And as they stood hand in hand beneath the chapel arch, the same old woman who had once brought her soup wiped a tear from her cheek. They tried to silence her, she whispered. But now the whole kingdom listens. And perhaps they always would, because the fire Seraphina carried wasn't just hers. It was every woman's who had been told to stay quiet. Every man's who had chosen honor over power. Every voice that once trembled and now stood tall. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Leave a comment. Have you ever felt like your voice didn't matter? What would you say today if the world were finally ready to listen? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Someone out there needs this story more than you know. We'll be back with another tale of courage, love, and justice. Because in this kingdom, every voice has a story worth telling.